Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews, where we like to explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. And today, it's an ink day. This is the first of two reviews of Lamy's new special edition inks. We'll get to the petrol next, but first, I want to look at the sepia. I've been on a brown ink kick anyway, so this just seems like the right place to start. So if you're not familiar, Lamy likes to put out special edition inks or an ink every year, and often they're tied to the color of whatever those special edition pens are, although to this year, that is not the case. Lamy put out their special edition petrol a while back, and then, the ink was just nowhere. I don't know what the reason for that was or anything, but I patiently waited until they finally released these two inks. So I'm excited to finally get my hands on the petrol, and I'm excited because I like all kinds of shades of brown inks. I think the world is a better place with brown inks in it. So in this review, we will look at the ink, obviously. I'll also tell you what I like and dislike about Lamy's bottle, and we'll test it on several different kinds of papers, including an ink test, a chromatography. So let's get started. Now first, when you get your ink, of course, it comes in a box, right? And those of you who aren't familiar with Lamy inks, they always come in this silver gray box with a picture of the bottle on the front, and actually not a ton of information. Recycling materials, what they would like you to do with it when you're done. A little bit of information on how to fill your pen, because it does have this really handy well within the bottle that helps you get the most ink out of that bottle before you have to resort to a syringe. And quick instructions on how to use the blotter paper. Blotter paper in an ink bottle? Yeah, if you're new to Lamy inks, this is why a lot of people like their bottle. Not only does it have that ink well that aids in filling up a pen as you get closer to the end of the bottle, but you've got this handy little roll of blotter paper inside. And if, like me, there's always a Lamy bottle of ink on your desk, not this one, but the one at work, then having blotter paper right there handy is fantastic when you need to quickly refill a pen. It's absorbent on this side, slick on that side, and it just works really well. And one handy thing, the bottle cap on their inks usually gives you a good clue as to the color of what's inside if for some reason you can't quite tell looking through the glass bottle. Comes with this plastic base. Keeps everything nice and steady on the table. It has a nice wide mouth. Really, I think in terms of pure practicality, it's not the prettiest bottle, but in terms of pure practicality, Lamy has one of the best bottles out there, and in general, they are also usually a pretty good deal. You can see back here, we'll sneak peek a little, you can see that this bottle is $12. This is a special edition ink, but I've gotten their standard colors as low as $6 a bottle on sale. And while they don't have the widest catalog of colors, their inks are really well behaved, and their bottle, again, fantastic. The pen that we're going to use today is an oldie but a goodie here, and this is one that I like to use for ink reviews, although I have not done so in, I don't know, a couple of years. This is the Mahjong S5. It's an eyedropper pen. It came with this nib, which is a fine, and an extra nib unit with a stub, which I really need to go find because that would have been perfect, I think, for this review. I'm going to have to look that up, and next time around I'll use that nib instead. This is a great, handy little, easy-to-fill eyedropper pen. Something of a polarizing design, I guess, but honestly, it's a good, solid pen. The first of the papers I want to look at is Clairefontaine. This is a Clairefontaine spiral, as you can see, with a grid, and this is where we're going to do our water fastness test and our dry time and all of that. But first, let's look at how the ink looks on this page. This is, as you would guess from the cap, a reddish brown. It is sepia or sepia, depending on where you're from and how you want to say that. And it is an ink, as you can see, with really nice shading on the Clairefontaine paper. If you're not familiar with Clairefontaine, it's a made-in-France paper, and it is coated, and so inks do perform differently on coated papers like this or Rhodia paper or others. While we're talking about coated French papers, how about that Rhodia paper? So here you see, again, some nice shading. Now, this pen has a fine nib. It's not overly wet. It's not overly dry, just kind of in the middle for a fine. And you can see, especially in the writing, that there is some really nice shading, which is a characteristic of ink I always like to have. Here we have the Pen & Gear Dot Grid Spiral, made in India, sold at Walmart. I hope that doesn't change with all of the tariff action. I'll gladly pay the tariff if they just keep bringing this paper. And here you can see that the ink performs well here, and nice shading as well, and no issues on the other side. Only right here in that ink square, which is pretty wet and lots of lines, do you start to see a little bit of ghosting, but no bleed through. Really performs well on that paper. A newer favorite paper of mine, as you've noticed in these ink reviews, is the Irreful paper, here in a loose leaf sheet, which is easy to find on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. Just really good paper. And here again, you can see it writes a little bit broader on this paper. No feathering or anything like that on any of these papers so far. And again, nice shading, maybe a little bit more obvious actually on this particular paper. And if you look really, really close, you can even see just a slight bit in the wettest, darkest parts of sheen. But how would this perform on typical paper straight out of your copier or your printer? This is HP paper, and on the written side, it performs actually quite well. There are no feathering issues. You see a couple of places where I had an issue, but the ink doesn't have an issue, and you still get some nice shading. I think that's good performance for copy paper. On the other side, look at that. Not bad at all. No bleed through whatsoever, and only very minimal ghosting in a couple of spots. All right, several of us are fans of Ayush paper, also from India. How did it do here? Well, like most inks, it performed great. No feathering, nice shading. The color of the ink looks fantastic. It is an off-white paper, more of an ivory or cream. I'm sorry I said that for those of you who don't like how that word sounds. I don't either. And the color looks really good. No issue whatsoever on the other side, but none of the other inks either. Just a great performing paper in this case. Then we have our big box store El Cheapo spiral, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I love a cheap spiral with smooth paper. Bonus if nothing bleeds through, right? And this is one of those. This one is from Office Depot. I think it's called Just Basics. It's not the same one that I've been using in these reviews because James misplaced that somewhere and can't find it. Now on this paper, the shading, the color, all of that, very, very good. No issue whatsoever. No feathering or issues like that. And check that out. No problems on the other side. All right, one more paper, old school Tomoe River. I'm so glad that I still have some of this left, but I don't have much. I'm guessing 2025 will be the last year that I'm showing you this particular notebook. And here we just happen to have other inks on the page that are also shades of brown. So we have a chocolate pudding, which is a nice basic leaning toward walnut sort of a brown. Kind of reminds me of some old furniture. And then another ink that I'm going to review soon, Noodler's Gold and Limonite, looking good on this paper. And then that Lamy Sepia, and check that out. Really brings out the red tones here in this swatch. You can see in the writing this time with a wetter glass dip pen. Really looks good. I think this would look great in a broad or a stub nib. And the next thing I'm going to ink up is going to have one of those nibs. And in the third pass here, boy, that looks fantastic. And you do start to get just a little bit of that sheen. As you can see, looks really great on the old Tomoe River paper. All right, let's do an ink swatch here. Well, that is really going to be a wet one today. That first pass, we'll do our second pass and our third pass. All right, while that dries, let's go ahead and look early in the video at our chromatography. This is an interesting chromatography, and actually all three inks that I did one for today are quite interesting, but for completely different reasons, each one of them. This one I find interesting for how much fade there is. There's really not a lot going on here in terms of various colors. You see the red, you see that browner shade at the top. You can see a red-brown, well, very much matching color to the original line, but just faded out. It's just, it spread and it faded, but there's really not a lot of complexity going on here. It's kind of a simple ink, which is interesting because I think you get, yeah, that's simple, but there's still a lot going on here for a brown. You've got good shading and things like that, and it doesn't fade nearly as much on the page as it did here on the chromatography, even though, both are reflective of that chromatography. Very interesting. I also find it interesting whenever you do the swatching, there's a quality to the way that the ink is going down on the page that's a little bit different from some other inks. I wouldn't say that it seems thick. It's not goopy or anything like that, or I'd be concerned about smells and bacteria and things like that. There's nothing like that going on. But it just seems to go down on the paper differently from a lot of other inks that I've used and in similar shades. It's certainly different from other Lamy inks I've used. I don't know what's going on there. That's out of my league. I don't know. Maybe you do and can say, maybe you can go back and watch that part of the video and notice something if you have some expertise in that area. But for me as an amateur, it's interesting. And you can even see that in the way that every time I put the Q-tip down on the paper, I got a lot more ink just in that spot than I typically get in an ink swatch. Just something different there. Don't really know what caused that, but it's interesting. All right, let's go to dry times. This is the part of the video where we watch ink dry. Slightly more exciting than watching grass grow, and just about as pen and ink geeky as it gets. All right, let's see here. 5 seconds. 5 seconds? Well, you know, it's actually not all that wet at 5 seconds. How about 15? 15 seconds? Well, that's still a little wet. Whoops. We'll try 30. All right, 30 seconds, still just a little wet. That's kind of surprising after that 5-second test. That's interesting. However, if you look up here at that ink swatch, which is still not dry, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? We'll try a minute. All right, it's been a minute, and it is dry. So somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute, I would say between 45 seconds and a minute, which for the inks that I've been reviewing lately would make it about average. But I do notice up here where that swatch is wettest, that's not dry yet. Pardon me, that beep is telling me that a loaf of Latvian rye bread is ready and the smell is fantastic. I got to take a break, but I'll be right back. Man, that bread turned out good. All righty, let's see here. All right, it has been a couple of minutes. That water is doing its job to try and remove from memory what in the world you wrote. All right, so I'm going to dab this with a paper towel, and we're going to see, would we be able to read what I wrote on that grid, and is the grid still there and all that good stuff. Well, all right, this is not the worst result in the world. It's not a water-fast ink, doesn't pretend to be, but as typical inks go, I can see everything that I wrote. I can even see a very faint, the loops, which were kind of light to begin with, right here on the word still there. Yeah, it is. And I don't see, let me double check this. I don't see anywhere that the graph is just completely gone. It's close right in here. It's pretty close, but you can still read water test just fine. So, salvageable. We're going to put that down as, yes, it is salvageable. If you get water and if you remove it within a couple of minutes, you will probably be able to read what you wrote. Still, as I've said before, don't sign your mortgage with it. It's not check-friendly, but how many of us even write checks anymore? But yeah, you can salvage your notes or salvage your journal entry or something like that and know what it was that you said. All right, let's sum things up. Again, bottle 50 milliliters at a price of $12 per bottle. That's what I found on average in U.S. stores, and that's what I paid when I bought mine. Cool thing about the bottle, again, is that it does come with that blotting paper, just very handy little practical thing. And it is made in Germany. Now, would I buy this ink again? Yes, I think I would. It's hard competition when it comes to browns, in my mind, because I have some well-established favorite brown inks. I'm always checking out other new kinds, but also I can't burn through them fast enough to just keep collecting brown inks all the time, right? So would this stay in the collection? I think so, and here's why. I think it offers a unique enough shade to justify being an additional brown in my collection. And if we look at that ink swatch, you can kind of see why. It's a bit redder, and yet it's not overly light. Some sepia inks tend to be really too light for what I like, whereas this is really some nice shading from this ink. And if I even just went with the lightest part right here, I like it. Here in this fine nib, it performs quite well. Now, I will say that you will, when doing a really wet swatch, you notice that isn't the wettest part of those strokes. You are going to get just a little bit of bleed through, but in normal writing with a fine, it was, well, fine. I think the price is fair, especially for a special edition ink. Those tend to cost more regardless of the company, right? And this is still a good amount of ink. And again, one of the best bottles. So yes, I would probably buy this ink again. It's a great shade, good performance, and I'm pleased with it and the use that I've had so far. All right, what do you think? Is this an ink you like? Is it an ink you don't like? Is it a color you were hoping for? Is it a color you were hoping not to get? What's your opinion of the Lamy Sepia ink for 2025? And what's an alternative that you think is an even better sepia brown ink? Share that in the comments below. God bless you and have a great week.